All right, so I'll go ahead and get started. And then there's a note for you all in the chat about Q&A, which I'll get to at the end. So good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Welcome to Teaching Science Using Quizlet. Today, we're going to be talking about new and innovative ways to incorporate Quizlet in your science classroom. I hope you come away with some ideas and more than anything, just a spark or an inspiration for maybe a different way to use Quizlet that you haven't thought of before. So my name is Nora Walsh. I teach Chemistry 1, Honors Chemistry, and AP Chemistry at FJ Wrights High School in Evansville, Indiana. I have also in previous years taught integrated chemistry and physics, which is Indiana's version of physical science. So I do want to start with a poll real quick. So let me go ahead and launch this. And so the question here is, how have you used Quizlet already? And so if you've used Classic Live, I'll go ahead with a 1, checkpoint 2, and so on and so forth. So we can just get going. If you have never used Quizlet in your classroom and you are new to the Quizlet experience, I'd really like to hear that as well. So this is fantastic. It's really fun to watch these responses come in. So a lot of us have used flashcards, which makes a lot of sense, which is the original Quizlet way to use Quizlet. Classic Live and Test and Match are coming in behind as kind of the second thing. And then quite a few of us have never used Quizlet. So if you've never used Quizlet, welcome, and I hope you get some new ideas. And for those of us that have used Classic Live or anything else, again, hopefully new ways to think about it. Okay, so what I love about Quizlet. So I just want to start out by talking to you about why I use Quizlet in my classroom and my favorite things. It has staying power. I got so tired of making resources that I would spend a lot of time and effort in that would then disappear when that particular software didn't get supported by my district anymore, or in at least 2 cases, actually just went out of business altogether. And all that work was lost. Quizlet has been around for at least 10 years. Everything I've made on Quizlet is still on Quizlet. It is worth your time investment. Also, it increases student engagement. I actually heard about Quizlet Live from my students. I was looking for an activity one day and a student goes, "Miss Walsh, you should try Quizlet Live. It's really a lot of fun." That to me was the best endorsement. When your students want to do something in class, you know that you're going to hook them in. It's very fast to use on the teacher side. I have had moments where I did a warm-up and it became very obvious from the student responses that they had not retained the previous lessons in the way that I had expected them to. And so what I would do is pose a quick question to them to get them thinking at their seats for 2 to 3 minutes. I'll hop on Quizlet, do a fast search, find a set that looks like it's going to work for that topic, and then go just right into Quizlet Live. So I have actually been able to modify my plans on the fly using Quizlet in the past. It can be used both in and out of class to maximize achievement. And I'm going to talk about that today as well, because I also think that's one of the really powerful things about Quizlet, because a lot of the, especially gamified software that we use in class has to be done in class. They can't really do it individually. And that's not true of Quizlet. They can go home and do it on their own. And so that's a great strength to Quizlet as well. So my favorite ways to use Quizlet, just to kind of give you a preview, quick warm-ups and exit tickets. It's super fast to launch quiz or test in your class. You can use longer group sections for practice. I do a lot of Quizlet Live. And sometimes Quizlet Live will go 20 or 30 minutes in my classroom, and my students are still learning and still mastering. And I will often ask them, do you guys want to do another round of Quizlet Live, or do you want to move on to something else? Frequently, I'd say the majority of the time, they want to do another round of Quizlet Live. As a station during rotating review for summative assessment. So I often set up tables that they kind of rotate through for review. Sometimes I dictate which tables they need to go to. Sometimes I give them open choice. Sometimes I set a timer. And what I like to do is have, say, match up on my board, and then they come up in their groups and they'll do match at the main, at my pro board. And that's one of the stations that they rotate through. and then as part of a study guide or retake ticket. So we like to produce digital study guides. And then when we do retest, which I offer retest for all of my assessments, we have them kind of prepare again for the test. And I like them to show me or tell me in what way they've prepared for their test. And so Quizlet is often an option on their study guide or retake ticket for test prep. So the first thing you want to do when you're getting going with Quizlet is you want to set up your classes. Okay, so there's a couple ways you can do this. I like to set up my classes by course itself. It's just the way my brain works. I've learned that after my 19 years in the classroom. So I think in terms of my courses, so I have my classes set up in this way: AP Chemistry, Chemistry 1, and Honors Chemistry. And even when I'm grading, I find that I go through that. I don't typically grade by period. I grade by item in my course. So I'll grade all of my Chemistry 1 Quizlet, and I'll just jump in my grade book. If you think in terms of periods and that's what works better for you, absolutely set up your classes in that way. Then you invite your students using the link. Okay, so you can do it here or there. And integration with Google Classroom is super easy by using the link. You just drop it in Google Classroom. And then what I like to do is just make it the warm up for one of the very early days of school. Hey, everybody, click on the link and join my class in Quizlet. It is really important that you set up classes in Quizlet, though, because of the benefits for your students. By joining your class in Quizlet, your students receive unlimited access to test and learn for free if they're enrolled in your class and they're studying sets that you've added to the class. So you want them to do that. You also get to track their progress and see how they're doing if they're in your class. Once you've set up your classes, then you begin to curate your sets. And I have 3 ways that I like to curate my sets, and I want to show you examples of all of it. So the first option is to find another set and use it as is. And as I said a few minutes ago, that often is less than 5 minutes. And you frequently get lucky and find the perfect Quizlet already made. So here's just a screen grab of what that looks like. I put in a very general search term of energy, and then you get all these study set results. And then as you click on them, you get a set preview. And one thing I wanted to show you is a way that you can filter. So if you have a co-teacher on your team, you can filter by school. You can filter by the number of terms. I find that a little less useful personally in my classroom. Sometimes it's nice to filter by users. For example, if I say something today and you want to go find or show you a set and you want to go find that set, you can search by my name. And then also your content type. I find this to be very helpful in science. If I specifically want my students to be doing a set that is based on a diagram or that incorporates images, you can search for that up here, right there. You can find another set as your starting point and edit it to make it perfect for your particular classes. And this is what I do the most. It typically takes me less than 10 minutes. Sometimes it takes me more than that if it's like an in-depth thing, or if I want to make a very large set. So sometimes I had a high school history teacher that used to say quantity has a quality all its own. Sometimes I like to spend the time up front to make very large Quizlet sets so that I can continue to have like a fresh randomly pulled selection for later on. But again, typically less than 10 minutes. The way you do that is you find a set that is already on the way to what you want, and then you go down here to save and edit. You click that, and essentially what it does is it's like making a copy in Google Drive. And so it makes a copy of the set, and then you can go in, it makes it yours, and you can edit it by deleting terms, adding images, whatever it is that you want to do with that set. You can also make your own set from scratch. I generally do not do this because I find that I don't have to. A lot of sets are already on the way, and I can just take one that exists and edit it, add to it, as I talked about. But if you have some worksheet or activity or a set of prompts that you love already and you want to turn it into Quizlet, this is what you do. And then once you've got your set created in whatever way you use it like this, you want to make sure that you add to class or folder first, okay? And you do those separately. And what I like to do is add it to a folder and then go in and add it to the class. And the reason you want to add it to a folder is that your folder is almost like your repository, kind of your holding area for your Quizlets, and then you can add them to the class as you want students to see it. At least that's what's easiest for me. But this is, again, great. If you have something unique that you want to turn into a Quizlet. Be aware that it's out there once you put it out there. So before and after, I want to show you kind of how I got started down this path of using Quizlet in unique ways. So I found this worksheet years ago. It's an activity from NASA, and I really like it for an early activity in science. This is typically one of my first week things that I do. This has students examine facts or statements and determine if it's a fact, law, hypothesis, theory, or belief. And I find that this really builds science literacy skills. It's our first dive into discussion. And it's also kind of the first time I introduce students to the idea of sometimes we talk about things even if we're not sure what the right answer is. So they might read statements and not know if that's a fact, a law, hypothesis, especially if they haven't reached that science course yet. Like there's some physics statements in here. So some of my chemistry students don't know what they are, but then we can start to talk about picking out elements that, you know, why do we think it's a fact, law, hypothesis, et cetera. So I really liked that aspect of this activity and the group discussions that we got from it. Then when we had to go onto web-based learning in COVID, I turned it into a Google Slide drag and drop. I love Google Slide drag and drops. I use them all the time in my classes. But I really felt like I lost something with this particular activity because one of two things happened. So students either did this individually and I lost all of the discussion because they didn't engage in the breakout rooms because they were so busy dragging and dropping, or the opposite. They were so busy discussing that they didn't do the dragging and dropping. And then they had this slide that still had the prompts, but they didn't know what went where. So then it occurred to me one day, I could do it on Quizlet Live. And actually, you can see I found it exactly as it was. I had to do no prep on this Quizlet. It was this worksheet that another teacher had already set up in Quizlet. And what I like about it being Quizlet Live is I still get the group conversations that I liked from before, and they have the answers because it's a Quizlet set. And so they can go back and revisit it on their own independently at home to do some reinforcement of the topic. So that's kind of what got me started down this road. So let me give you some ideas of ways you can use Quizlet creatively. So you want to start in the way that you're probably already using Quizlet, which is reinforcing basics by thinking in terms of traditional flashcards. This is great for spiraling or review. So for example, it's important for my AP students to know oxidation numbers. They use oxidation numbers for justifications of more complex concepts, but this is essentially a rote memorization task. Quizlet is great for that. And there's a lot of foundational facts that they need to know, okay? And so again, using traditional Quizlet, kind of the drill and kill. Then to step it up from there, I would encourage you to think about taking your worksheet, your sorts, your practice problems, and turn them into collaborative experiences with immediate feedback. And for me, it's the immediate feedback. I want my students to know right away, as much as possible, if they got a problem right or wrong, because then we're not ingraining bad science, right? Or incomplete thoughts, or whatever it is, misconceptions. So for example, here's a set that I found that, again, I did not make this. I found this and it took me less than 5 minutes on identifying types of reactions, okay? So I used to do this as a worksheet. I've done this as a sort, but this is a way to have your students do it in a new way with Quizlet. And so I would put this at the end of a unit when we've already gone into, we've done several labs, we've done a lot of different discovery activities, we've done some modeling. And then now we can kind of wrap it up. Okay, now can you pick out features of these reactions that help you figure out what kind of reaction it is? And then embrace your possibilities and get creative. So one way to get creative is with diagrams. And this is one of my favorite new finds on Quizlet. So you can actually put a diagram on Quizlet and then you can highlight areas of it. And then the term corresponds, you can see here, it's cut off a little bit, but location. And so you have the term and the definition and then the location on the diagram. And it's just fantastic for science. There's all kinds of applications in all areas. And then by allowing students to edit sets for collaboration. So I don't know if you knew this, but you can actually set up a set so that it's editable by your class. Now, this is where you really do want to think about how you're setting up your classes. Do you want one set to be editable by all of your Chemistry 1 students, Or do you want it to be limited to just your first period chemistry 1 students? And so you do want to be thinking about those decisions. Me personally, I want it to be all of them, because I find that I will often talk about, say, in 4th period, something that 2nd period brought up. And so I like to have kind of a single repository for all those ideas. Again, it's the way that my brain works. So having students edit a set really ups the level of thinking of your students. You're having them think critically about what should go in, designing prompts, what terms are important to add in a set, and so on and so forth. So this is really a fantastic way to have your students collaborate, and also to take some of the work and put it on them, because we know that the more students analyze and think through their thinking, the more they're going to retain. And then also use Quizlet as an open-ended way. So I was also trying to show you that here. So for example, if you have a phenomenon that you're talking about in your science class, you could create a study set where you have students post questions, and maybe the term is just the question and the answer is just their name. And then what you've got here is this repository of student questions that you can frequently revisit. And if you have a couple minutes in class, you can say, okay, Joey asked this question. Let's take a minute and see what you guys think about it. Now, you could do this on a Google Doc, you could do this in another way, but what I like about doing it in Quizlet is that if you're one of those teachers that has a question box in your classroom, you can set up a set that is your question box, and then you can have Quizlet kind of randomly draw a question for you by just doing it as a flashcard, and then it does all that work for you instead of you having to go through. And it's this deck that can continue to be built. So you can gamify your just-in-time practice or review with Quizlet Live, which again is my absolute favorite way to use Quizlet. So what I like about Quizlet Live is it provides quick, immediate, and potentially no prep practice in class that is very engaging for your students. It is my students' favorite in-class group practice by far. If I give them a choice of Quizlet or something else, particularly if we're going to be working in groups, they always choose Quizlet Live. My favorite aspect of Quizlet Live is there's no timer. So the class sets the pace, and you can see that here. And what's really great about that in science is we ask some pretty in-depth questions that take time to answer and really think through. I don't like the stress that having a 20-second, 40-second, or even a 90-second timer puts on the students a lot of times, especially during formative experiences. I want them to be able to stop and think and take their time. However, the fact that this is shown on your board does still put them under. They don't want to waste their time because they don't want to fall behind. And so there is this subtle timer mentality being put in place, but the class is setting that pace. And so that's really fantastic. And then if you do want a timer, you can use Checkpoint. Checkpoint has a timer built in, but this is just my favorite because I love that there's no timer. And then what I'll do is I'll see that if I have a group that's kind of been stationary for a while, I'll go give them some support. And so that's another thing that's fantastic here. You can immediately find in-class practice, as I mentioned earlier, to use in response to your formative data, which is just fantastic. I use Quizlet. If I need to make a change to my lesson plans on the fly, or with 1 day's notice or something like that, Quizlet is always my go-to. If you have diagrams and images, I'm really enjoying Match. Match is great because you can show the diagram and image and show the prompt at the same time, because a lot of times it doesn't make sense, or the definition, it doesn't make sense to look at an image without having some kind of words to know what you want the image to be describing. And so I like Match in particular for that. You can differentiate in-class practice with QChat. So QChat is new. It's really a lot of fun. I like QChat a lot. So students work through a unit. You can use formative data to identify an area of weakness, and you can go about this in 2 ways. You can identify the weakness for the students, or you can have them do some analysis of their own learning and come up with a weakness themselves. And then tests can help you to do this, by the way. And then you can have them go into QChat, and either you provide them with topic or have them do it, and then they use QChat to explore the topic. And so QChat comes up. QChat is AI. And so QChat will ask you, what would you like to do today? And you can tell QChat what you want to do. You can quiz me, tell me a story, practice with sentences, and so on and so forth. Some features of QChat are a little more geared, a little more appropriate for science than others. Some of these are maybe better for foreign language, but or English or something like that. But what I really enjoyed about QChat is that as you get questions right, it goes deeper and more complex in thought. And as you miss it, QChat will talk you through your misunderstanding there. So if you need accountability, I have a couple of ideas for you to do this. What I like to do, we have screen monitoring software in my district. And so what I do is I pull that up on a second screen and I watch students' screens. And so I can see that they're going through QChat. And that's usually enough accountability for me. But if you want to take that a little further, you could have students create a T-chart during the QChat of what they knew or what they didn't know during the chat. And then this could actually be your exit ticket. And what you could have them do is turn it in. And that would also give you a snapshot of lots of students said they didn't know this, or lots of students said they didn't know that. And then that gives you some formative data to act on as well. And it also gives students a written list of where they still need to deepen their understanding. You can provide out-of-class support with expert solutions. So expert solutions are kind of exactly what they sound like. It's experts who have written out full work to textbook problems. So if you have a textbook, you can have students search for the textbook, and then they can actually, once they've identified their textbook, they can click on it, and then they can find specific chapter. You can see here chapter and page numbers for the problems. What it does beyond, it's beyond the answers in the back of the book. It's actually step-by-step answers. Now, some of you may be thinking that this is not what you want because you don't want students to be able to go and find the answers, but I would counter with this. What I ask my students to do with homework is do your work first in pencil or pen, whatever you prefer, and then go back with the key or expert solutions and find the answers and correct your work in a second color. And then what this does is it saves you a ton of in-class time because students can find their easy mistakes and fix them quickly. Oh, I forgot to double that. Or, oh, I forgot to recognize that this is in the light cycle instead of the dark cycle. Whatever is going on in your classroom, or sorry, your lesson right then. But it's where the students say to you, I looked at the expert solution and I still don't understand. And that is just, that cuts right to the heart of the issue. And then you go into class and you talk it through, and then you address the misconception or the error there. And so I would use expert solutions in that way. And it allows students to get support on how to do a problem, not just the final answer. Okay, and then I talked to you about that. So you can also browse by subject. So you can look at chemistry, physics, biology. So they have several subjects that you can search, and you can also search by your textbook, and they're continuing to update. I think they said they've added 2 million new solutions in the last year. So it's a really exciting thing. So I have another poll for you. This one is how many of us use NGSS? And it won't let me launch my poll. Hang on. I have to stop that one first. Here we go. Okay, so NGSS stands for Next Generation Science Standards. So I have 3 choices for you. I have been using NGSS and I'm very familiar with integrating it into my classroom. Choice 2 is I will be using NGSS, but I don't know much about them. And choice 3 is I don't use NGSS. Okay, so interesting. The majority of us do not use NGSS, but actually it's pretty evenly distributed. So even if you don't use NGSS, I still have a lot to say that I hope will help you. So stay with me. I am going to talk a little bit about how to use Quizlet in an NGSS classroom, because it might sound like Quizlet is not applicable to NGSS, but it actually is. So this is not an NGSS talk, but I do want to point out a couple of things. So if you look at NGSS, and this is a fantastic document if you haven't seen it before, I think this is great for any science classroom, regardless of if you use NGSS, about how to kind of modernize science teaching. So it will involve less rote memorization of facts and terminology and more facts and terminology learned as needed while you're going through the learning process. So that might sound like, well, I don't use Quizlet anymore. But actually, what I would suggest is that all this means is you shift when you use Quizlet. So instead of starting our units and chapters with please define all these terms and turn in your vocabulary list, instead we'll generate the vocabulary list as we go through the unit. And then at the end of the unit, here's your Quizlet deck. And again, you can do this on Quizlet. You can have students create their own set. And this can be kind of your class vocabulary list. The learning of ideas disconnected from questions about phenomena, and instead we're going to involve phenomena. You can do this in Quizlet too. So you can make your set have a theme of a particular phenomena. You can have students ask questions, as I talked about earlier, about phenomena in a set. Pre-planned outcome or cookbook laboratories for hands-on activities. And instead, we're going to be doing multiple investigations driven by student questions that lead to deep understanding. I have a really cool idea for this. I'm very excited to show you in the next couple of slides. So just again, getting your juices flowing about how to use NGSS, how to use Quizlet. So remember with NGSS, there's 3 dimensions of the framework. And what to be totally upfront with you, I'm a number 2. We're just adopting NGSS this coming year in Indiana, but I've been doing a lot of learning about it over the last couple of years because I knew it was coming. And then last year I started trying to incorporate some of the ways to teach kind of NGSS style. And what was really interesting for me is the core ideas are what we always think of as, standards or what scientists know. But then when I thought about these cross-cutting concepts, patterns, cause and effect, so on and so forth, I talk about this stuff in my class all the time. I just never thought about labeling it as a specific thing to focus on in a lesson. And then science and engineering practices, we've actually had those in the Indiana state standards for a long time. And then these are also present in AP as well, the AP curriculum. So again, there's this idea about all good scientists do all 3 of these things all the time, but our students are still learning how to be scientists. And so what we do intrinsically and innately, they need a little bit of support. So we can use Quizlet to do that. So it would be a very long session if I went into how to use Quizlet in every cross-cutting concept, every steps, and so on and so forth. So I thought what I would do is just, again, get your juices flowing, give you some ideas about ways to apply Quizlet to some steps. And I picked 4 steps because for me, a lot of times I kind of start thinking in terms of the steps and then through the lens of one of the TCIs that I'm covering, and then think about the cross-cutting concepts as well. And so depending on your lesson, that kind of dictates your starting point. So I'm going to dive into an example with each one of these. So for constructing explanations and designing solutions. So sometimes that starts with foundational facts that support your explanation. So for example, you might be talking about molecular geometry because your students need to understand this in order to truly understand intermolecular forces, polarity, how molecules interact with each other, reactions, and so on and so forth. So the first thing I would have my students do is a hands-on activity. There's a fantastic marshmallows activity. Well, the original activity is written with foam balls, and then I do it with marshmallows and toothpicks. And I actually have students discover the geometry on their own in a hands-on way. And if you want that activity, by the way, you can Google kind of discovering molecular shapes, and it's a chemical education exchange activity, which is free. But then I have students explore the PhET. So their exploration kind of just explores the shapes, but they don't put a name to it. And then we use PhET to go into the formal names and the bond angles. And then I have them practice that and memorize that with learn. They need to be able to justify whether or not a molecule is polar or nonpolar by using these terms, particularly in AP. And so that is a kind of a memorization activity, but I go through the discovery process first, and then we do the memorization. Using mathematics and computational thinking. So what I like here is using Quizlet to practice calculations, again, with that immediate feedback. I love the immediate feedback. So I have students go through a Quizlet. This is one of those times where I would make a gigantic set. I might put 50 problems in a set. And then today I might ask students to do 10 in class as practice. And then students can raise their hands as they get answers wrong, and I can provide one-on-one support. Then tomorrow I might have them do 5 more as a warm-up, or I might pull 5 as a warm-up. And so, it's just really great because you can just continue to build your set. And the other nice thing about Quizlet is as you edit it, that's a seamless process for students. So you adding on to a set does not impact what they've done. One thing I don't like about some quizzing software is that if you add a question, you can't add a question once students have attempted the quiz, and that's not true in Quizlet. Okay, so then, developing and using models. You can use diagrams, as I showed you earlier, to reach a higher level of analysis. This is a worksheet that I took from my friend, Michael Faribaugh, who's a fantastic chemistry teacher. So he developed this worksheet that was it's actually a matching activity that ties together particle view diagrams with areas of a titration curve. And so I just assigned little labels to the different areas to get students to thinking about it. And then I use match and they drag and drop the particle view diagram to either the description or the point on the graph. And then what's kind of cool about match is if you reload match, it will put up a new combination each time you reload, which is fun. And then asking questions and defining problems. I have students edit sets to share their thoughts. And this is what I was excited to show you. So for example, I found this set. This was already made. A teacher had already done this, and it was exactly what I was looking for. So this is error analysis in the chem lab. And so what I would do if I were you is I would put in a few prompts about, so let's take a particular lab. And then you can put your prompts in there. If the error was this, how would that impact the results? And then you can also have students add their own. We made this error, and this is how we think it impacted the results. Or I changed this variable, and this is how it impacted the results. And then what you have is this fantastic set of ways that the scientific method is, like how to go through the scientific method and analyzing your process and revising it and so on and so forth. And then again, it's a great warm up. You can pull up a question quickly and then have students just, like this one, assuming all the volumes are made the same, how would this change affect the reaction? You can just project that particular card, that particular prompt on your board and have students answer it and then discuss it. So I think this is a fantastic way to integrate Quizlet. So then I just wanted to show you to think about the 3D thinking. If you wanted to think about it, here you can use images and diagrams to relate the core ideas with the cross-cutting concepts and apply the science practices. So this is one that I created, and this is match for nuclear. So this came at the very end of the unit. This was right before the assessment. And so what you can see that I've done here is I've taken several different models that we've been exploring about nuclear reactions, and then I'm having the students use the model and match it to the descriptive term. And so again, like by the end of the unit, they get to the point where they should be able to tell what kind of nuclear decay process is happening in each of the models. So in this way, I've really integrated all of the 3 dimensions of NGSS in one Quizlet set. Okay, and then my final thought here is don't forget about spiraling. Every year I tell myself I need to do a better job of spiraling, and Quizlet really makes that very simple for you. So for each standard or unit or learning target, consider creating a set of review questions, okay? And then as you move through the semester, it becomes very simple to use the combine feature to make larger or more comprehensive decks for review. And so I tried this really recently, and it was like less than 2 minutes to combine sets. You go into a set and you click combine and you collect the other sets, and then boom, it makes a new one. And it's fantastic because you can have flashback Fridays and you can just on the fly right before class combine a couple sets, or you can go to the end of the semester and have this gigantic set for the whole entire term, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to be using Dan Reed's Thou Shalt Not Forget for AP Chemistry this year, and I'm going to be doing Flashback Fridays. And so what I've started doing this summer is creating Quizlet, and Thou Shalt Not Forget is already in Quizlet in a couple of places, but I wanted to divide it up by unit. And so I'm dividing it up, and then as I move through the class, I'll just continue to combine and add new sets together so that it becomes this comprehensive review of these general ideas that I don't want students to forget. And then encourage these students to visit the decks at home so they stay sharp. I keep calling them decks, they're sets. Sets at home so they stay sharp on past content. I tell my students, hey, as you're sitting on the bleachers, in between games for 15 minutes, pull out your phone, open the Quizlet app, and just go through, this review set just to freshen up. I don't assign homework in most of my classes. I do an AP, but I try and make it very predictable. But I tell students, like, you can, really take advantage of little short bits of time where you can maximize your learning just by going in and doing a little bit of a spiral review. And then again, remember, you can have students build these sets. And so I'm planning on doing that this year, especially my EP class, have students, I'm going to have Mr. Reed, thou shall not forget, but I'm also going to have paralleling that students creating their own set of things that they think they need to remember moving forward. And so things that they frequently forget that they want to make sure they remember. And you've probably had those experiences in class. Students saying things like, man, I always forget such and such and so and so. Go add it to the Quizlet set so that you don't forget. And so your classmates don't forget either. Okay, so I hope you got some ideas. I don't necessarily have all the solutions all the time, but I am going to do my best to answer some questions. Also, this is my contact information. You are welcome to reach out to me after this session on Twitter. My Instagram is more like me, personal me, but if you want to get to know me a little bit better in terms of my life, feel free to follow me on Instagram. Here's my email. And then I also produce chemistry videos that are targeted mostly at students on TikTok. I do sometimes put teacher materials on TikTok as well. If you're an interactive notebooking person, I have my interactive notebooks published on Chemical Education Exchange, and I have shared a lot of those on TikTok as well, and that's all free. So I'm going to hop into the Q&A and see what I can do. Okay. It's possible to make a copy of set. Yes, it is. So what you can do, if you have a set, is you can go in and at the bottom of the set, you can click copy. I believe it just says copy, but yes, you can do that. You can make a copy. And then what I would do is rename it. So, just put the year or put the period or update it or version 2.0 or whatever. So can you see which students are contributing to the sets? Yes, you can. I don't know in what depth you can see that. Like, I don't know if you can see down to the individual question, but I know that you can see which students are contributing to the sets. And if you have specific questions about that, feel free to reach out to Quizlet. They are great about responding to questions. A T-chart is where you have students just make a graph that looks like this. And what I usually have them do is split the paper down the middle and then draw a line across the top. And then it's just for direct side-by-side comparisons. And so what I often use T-charts for is opposites, or, and I know this is going to sound completely opposite of that, but things that come kind of in complementary pairs. So you can use a T-chart for, like, I use them for acids and bases all the time. So here's a feature of an acid, here's a feature of a base, here's, a feature of an acid, here's the corresponding feature of the base. And so that is a great way for students to kind of organize their thoughts in a way. It's just a scaffold and a graphic organizer. To link or schedule checkpoints in Quizlet Lives via Google Classroom. See, I always start Quizlet Live just by projecting it on the board and having students enter their code, but I believe you could. I think you could just drop the link in and just schedule the post via Google Classroom like you always would. Now, I do know you can actually password protect your sets in Quizlet, which I didn't actually know until yesterday at another session that I attended an unconference. So you can password protect it. I believe you can also restrict a particular set to particular class. So like, only the class could see it. So that's another way, if you wanted to kind of restrict access for a particular time while you're working ahead, that's another way to do that. Can I use the free version for classes? You can absolutely use the free version. You lose some of the functionality and you lose some of the kind of advanced features. For example, I believe you have to have the pro version in order to Quizlet Plus, in order to create sets with diagrams. And then there's a few other things you can do as well in Plus that you can't do with the free version. So you can search for images with Quizlet, with the free version of Quizlet, but you can't upload your own images to sets and without Quizlet Plus. Quizlet Plus is really great. I have really enjoyed using Quizlet Plus. I used the free version of Quizlet for years and years and years. And upgrading to Plus has really opened my eyes to a lot of things that I was missing out on. I'm excited about it. But you can still use the free version, and you can set up classes in the free version as well. So yeah, is there a way to link and schedule? Okay, so we talked about that. When you combine sets, are the original sets still there uncombined? Yes, they are. So when you combine sets, it actually, if you don't rename it yourself, what it does is it just tags, it like smashes both of the titles of both sets together. So it becomes very obvious to you that that's what you've done. But that's, again, what I love about combining is it's super easy to do that and you don't lose any of your work. Password protect. Let me see if I can find that for you really quick. Okay, so if you wanted to go into this set here, and then you go down. You might have to do it from the class folder itself. I have to be totally upfront because I didn't know you could do that until yesterday. I have, whoops, clicked on the wrong thing. I have yet to have to password protect anything because I didn't know you could. So I did do it yesterday, but I've only done it the one time. So if I click on this one. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to find it as quickly as I would like. So what I would, wait a minute. There it is. You go in the wheel. And I don't remember where you have to be in the wheel, but I do know that it is somewhere in there. So what I would do, and I'm sorry that I don't know that off the top of my head, but what I would do is just do a Google search or go into Quizlet and search their help, and it will be, I'm sure it will be there. So it looks like maybe we're going to get some additional support from somebody on that one. So we've got time for maybe a couple more questions. We've got 2 minutes left. Oh, yes. Okay. So Brad posted the PDF teacher's guide to Quizlet, which is really, really helpful. So thank you, Brad, for dropping that in the answer there. So that will help you as well. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So thank you so much for attending today. I really had a lot of fun putting this together. And what's really cool, of course, about Quizlet and everything is once you start thinking about new and creative ways to do something, it's really just a jumping off point and you get more and more ideas. So I hope I was able to help you come up with some new ideas. And if you were inspired and you create something on Quizlet, tweet me, please. I would really love to see what you came up with. I would love to reach out and work with anyone who's interested in that. I'm very big in collaborating online. So reach out to me in any one of these fashions. Follow me on TikTok, follow me on Twitter, shoot me an email, whatever works for you. Check out my blog on Chemical Education Exchange. Thank you all again for attending. I hope you had that you're having a great day and you have a fantastic rest of your summer and a wonderful school year.